Okay, I'm delighted to be here with everyone. And the first thing that I'm hoping that everyone can do is, if you don't have some pen and paper with you in front of you, I would love you to grab it, because this is going to be an interactive session. It's bound to be exciting, we hope. So the one thing that we can say about leadership is that it is exciting, but we do all avoid things consciously or unconsciously. And it is human. And that's in our lives, in our work lives, and in our personal lives. And it's human for me. In my personal life, I avoid all forms of cooking. Thank goodness for my husband. Outside of maybe oatmeal, I'm a little ambitious in the mornings. But today, I'm going to be talking about a topic that I believe will challenge you to rethink. And that is what Adam Grant likes to say in his book, Think Again, about your perspective on your responsibilities as a leader. So we're going to talk about where you may be able to stretch and grow in some of those areas that you may or may not be avoiding. Okay, so before we dive into your responsibilities, I want you to imagine perhaps one or a few of some of those challenges that you may be avoiding. Maybe it's a difficult behavioral conversation that you need to have with someone. Maybe it's a decision that you need to make, but you have been putting off. We talked a little bit, for those of you that were in the keynote, about decisions and decision awareness. It's not easy making decisions, and it can be things that we tend to put off. Maybe it's a new vendor decision that multiple team members perhaps disagree on. COVID-related decisions have caused lots of challenges for different teams, whether that's what are we going to do about remote work or vaccines. Maybe there's conflict between two individuals on your team and you're not quite sure how you want to resolve it. Maybe it's budget decisions or discussions that still need to take place. Or could be communication challenges or not enough communication. And here's a very common one that I hear a lot about, and I even mentioned: the prioritization of work and projects. One of the key responsibilities, and one of the toughest, honestly, that I think many leaders struggle with is that prioritization. And we've talked about that hunger for clarity in making those tough decisions about prioritization is really something that requires some hefty decision making. And then there's that meeting malaise, meeting stew. And if you find yourself in meetings where you're talking about everything from strategy, big competitive threats, all the way down to credit card receipts, you know that maybe you're having what's called meeting stew. And how do you get your meetings or decide on meetings that are going to be more strategic meetings are going to be here, idea and ideation meetings are going to be here. And then there's the common right now, unfortunately, that people are dealing with employee burnout and hiring challenges. And one of the things that leaders are dealing with is they are aware of this, but how do you take the time amidst all your other responsibilities to deal with making decisions about how to approach this? The list goes on. Now, this is really critical. This is not about judgment today at all. All of these things are all across the board for leaders everywhere. And my job is not to sit here and say, you're not doing this, you're not doing this. All of these things are things that impact me all the time. This is simply about giving you the opportunity to say, these are potential areas that I might become more aware of and perhaps get some tools or models or new insights that might make me think differently and be able to do my job in a different way that would allow it to be more sane. I like to think of myself as someone that helps people feel a little bit more sane because I think we can all use it today. So we already know that you've got drive, passion, and heart. That's clear. Anyone that has survived the last 18 months, you've got drive, passion, and heart, particularly in the Springfield area. You've gone right into the heart of being a leader, diving into big issues. So we know I just want you to know that's the bar that I'm looking at and dealing with. So anything beyond that, you're already at the top echelon. We're working on modifications and tweaking. You're also invested in growth. Otherwise, you wouldn't be in this breakout session. So what we're doing today is we're going to lean into those 5 critical areas of responsibilities that leaders most often abdicate or avoid. That's the ones we're going to dive into. That if you do this, you can grow both organizational health and ambitious results. So I'm going to show you the 5 areas that are most often avoided or abdicated. And then you can decide, you're like, oh, I don't abdicate those 4. Or you can say, maybe I do. We'll look at them together. Now, why do leaders avoid or abdicate? There's a whole slew of reasons. Take a look. You can decide which one fits you. I listed exhaustion twice because I think it connotes enough that I think it deserves to be up there twice after the last year. But you see, I mean, it can be motives, it can be blind spots, it could be fear, it could be tediousness, it could be the discomfort. And I'm just going to point this out really quickly. We go into this because we're focused on the healthy side. But by doing this and by focusing on the healthy side, it's going to help us with the smart side. All right? So, are you ready? This is where you're going to need your pen and paper. Here are the 5 areas: developing the team, managing your direct reports and ensuring that they're managing theirs, having difficult and uncomfortable conversations, running great team meetings. And you're going to have an opportunity to see these again, so don't worry if you don't have them down. Communicating constantly and repetitively to employees. So you'll see each of these areas again, so you don't have to worry about getting them all down. But this is where I want you to be able to pull out a piece of paper, and we're going to use the chat box a little bit as well, because I'm really curious about how people are feeling about the different areas. And here we go. So we're going to rank each area, and there's going to be different responsibilities listed under each. And this is the scale that we're working with. I'm going to say a statement, and if you feel like you're great at it, you're going to give yourself a 5. And if you don't think you're doing anything with it, just give yourself a 1. So that's the scale, and this scale will be on each of the statements, okay? So let's talk first about developing your team. Now, I know that some of you are in small businesses, and so it may just be 2 of you, and that's fine. It may just be you and another person. You can think of that as your team. There's no problem with that. Or you may have a team of 5 people. That's fine too. So here are the first 4 statements that we're going to take a look at. And we may have to move this over to the side for everyone to see. So the first question that I want you to rank yourself in is I build self-awareness in my direct reports through ongoing coaching about their behaviors. Okay. And what I want you to think about here is we oftentimes coach our direct reports around their work. Okay, right? We have goals for them and we're giving them feedback on that work. But the difference here is we're talking about behaviors. And this is why a lot of people avoid it. Sometimes we do that, I suppose, when they're being aggressive or they roll their eyes in a meeting or, those kinds of things. But are you helping them regularly build self-awareness about their behaviors? 1 to 5. Yep, you do that great. 1, strongly disagree. Number 2, I model vulnerability-based trust. Remember that bottom of the pyramid that we talked about, for those of you that were in the keynote, so that my direct reports witness what it means to be a leader, that would be yourself, who can admit mistakes, ask for help, and continuously learn. Are they seeing you do that as a leader? 1 to 5. Like 5, I'm knocking that out of the park. I have no problem admitting when I'm wrong. Number 3, I build cohesion by encouraging healthy conflict in meetings. This will be interesting. Are you the type that really encourages that healthy conflict in meetings? 1 to 5. And number 4, I ensure that our team members have clarity on decision-making after healthy conflict has taken place. So if you don't have healthy conflict on number 3, you probably can't answer number 4 well. So after those 4, if you're brave enough, in the chat, I want you to list which number you feel like is the toughest for you. I mean, there's no harm. Everybody has to have one that's harder than the others. But I would be curious for anyone to list which number is the hardest for most people. I just want to get a general sense from the group. I had a guess that this is probably, so we're seeing quite a few 3s and 1s. Okay. So 3s and 1s. And you know what makes sense about that? Healthy conflict in general is very normal to be tough because people tend to want to lean toward artificial harmony. And there's a general discomfort that people feel in what that healthy conflict looks like because they're afraid that it's going to lean toward personal attacks. And a lot of us are not quite sure what healthy conflict could look like, and is it safe? And are people going to take it personally, right? And the best thing a leader can do is to really facilitate that safety by leading with that vulnerability-based trust in number 2. The more you can do that and allow other people to do that in meetings, the easier number 3 is going to become. And the more you as a leader do number 1 and help them become aware of their blind spots, it's also going to be easier to do number 3. Okay? All right, let's move on to the second part of number 1, because there's more. Number 5, I encourage my direct reports to hold each other accountable regarding decisions and agreements. Again, this is like best practices when you are like doing everything is clicking and everything is right. Give yourself a 1 to 5. And this isn't blaming. I'm talking just holding accountable. Number 6, I encourage my direct reports to hold each other accountable on their behaviors too. Again, you'd have to have a very high level of trust in that team to be able to do that. So if someone's in a meeting, they're constantly on their phone, not paying attention, another teammate should be able to say, hey, I see you're on your phone and not paying attention. I'd really like you present in the meeting. That should be completely acceptable by anybody. If that's the, the meeting norm that people aren't on their phones. 1 to 5. And number 7, I create opportunities for my team members to learn more about each other's personalities and strengths. 1 to 5. Again, this is best practices, and it's difficult. I'm not saying it's difficult, but this, these are the investments on that healthy side that not everyone has recognized are critical. I think the personality and strengths one is probably one that more teams do than some of the other ones, but I'm going to ask the same question now for those that are brave enough. Which one of these 3 do you feel like is the most challenging for you? 5, 6, or 7? Can you put it in the chat? Okay. Okay. All right. Seeing a preponderance of 6. And what's really interesting about this is it all ties back, believe it or not, to conflict. The more that you can help your teams learn about conflict, about each other's personalities and strengths, you would be shocked at how much that can benefit them being able to have healthier conflict. I actually worked with a team. It was 2 teams that were just not getting along at all. And we did this exercise with this working genius, and we realized that the reason these 2 teams didn't get along at all is because one team, and there's different personality assessments out there, but I'm just going to give you the high level. This team was really good at kind of the work itself and the follow through of work. And this team was really good at the ideation and the upfront creativity. Well, of course they were going to be at odds because they were at the exact opposite. And so they were constantly butting heads because this team was always like, oh, let's create more new things. And this team was always like, no, let's just finish it. And so once we found that out about each other, they finally were like, that's why we always can't stand each other. And so they understood the conflict better, and they were able to then have the healthy conflict at the right juncture points. And they actually, at the end of this working session, were like, we actually should start leveraging each other more. We could actually benefit each other more. So all of these together can benefit. Okay, let's take, and the one thing I wanted to say about this on developing the team, what you can do, I'm sorry, I went ahead. At the end of developing the team, I can't seem to go back and get it, is I believe there were, 7 of these. If you take all of your scores and divide it by 7, you don't have to do that right now, but later on, you can go and just see what your average is for developing the team. And I'm going to give you my email address. So if we don't get through all of these, you can see which responsibility is perhaps causing you the most challenge. But I just want you to know this is 7. You can figure out what your average is. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Responsibility 2. This is managing direct reports and ensuring that they're managing theirs. Now, at first blush, you're like, of course I'm managing my direct reports, and I'm sure that you are. But again, I'm going to push the boundaries. This is, again, it's about rethinking, and I'm going to give you kind of those best practices. All right. So number 1, I help set the general direction of my direct reports work. And This is again, 1 strongly disagree, 5 strongly agree. And I'm going to just say one thing about this. And I don't know where each of you sit within the company, but I will say one thing about this that does come up sometimes. Sometimes I work with high-level executives, whether it be a CEO or an executive director or whatnot. And sometimes I hear, well, I hire high-level executives. I don't need to tell them what to do. I don't need to babysit them. And what's really important is for me to share with them that, yes, they're high-level executives, but they still need to be managed. You still need to know what they're doing. It's very important that you do that so that you ensure that there's alignment, okay? Doesn't mean that you want to micromanage them, but you still need to, everybody needs to be managed. Even the CEOs need to be managed by the board. So just making sure that you're not abdicating it altogether, which is why this falls into this route. And there is a weird fine line between setting general direction and micromanaging. So it's a very fine line. So number 1, set the general direction. Number 2, I ensure that each direct report's work is aligned with and understood by their peers. Very important. 1 to 5. Number 3, I help identify potential obstacles and problems as early as possible so I can assist in removing roadblocks. Again, if you're not, managing, you wouldn't be able to do that. And 4, again, this kind of goes back because it falls into 2 categories. I coach my direct reports on behavioral skills to help them grow and improve. So it kind of falls in this responsibility as well as the other one. Okay. So I'm going to ask the same question on this. 1 to 4, which one causes you maybe the most challenge? Just so I can get a sense from the group. Okay. Makes sense. Yeah. And this really comes down, thank you for those of you that are sharing. Number 2 is a very natural one that people abdicate avoid. And the reason being is it really has to do with meeting structures. They just don't have an outlet for that to happen. And it really is unfortunate because without that happening, a lot of critical knowledge isn't getting shared that needs to be shared. Because what ends up happening is there is overlap a lot of the times that doesn't get shared, and then downstream effects, their problems end up getting caused. So you really get a strong cohesive team when direct reports work is being shared. And there's a way to do meetings and stand-up meetings and weekly tactical meetings when that becomes possible. Okay, let's go on to the second part of responsibility number 2. This is one I totally did not do well at all. I just admit it outright. I make sure that my direct reports are managing their subordinates too, checking up on them, reminding them about giving guidance, removing roadblocks, and ensuring they are coaching their direct reports on behaviors. So like once you learn this, then it's like making sure that your direct reports are doing this as well. So it's like that whole next level.
Uh-oh, I think, Deborah, did we?
This is I understand the difference between giving general direction. Did someone say something? I understand the difference between giving general direction and micromanaging. So we know that one can be, there's a lot of room for interpretation in that one, we know. So I'm not going to necessarily ask on that one because I would guess that a lot of people would have difficulty with 5, but I also know that there is challenges with 6, but I want to make sure that we keep going on. Just write down for responsibility number 2 that there's 6, so that if you want to go back and divide your scores later, that you can. Okay, we're going to move on to number 3. This is fun, right? Who wants to do this? Who wants to have difficult and uncomfortable conversations? Oh, sign me up. That's why I became a leader, right? Yeah, no one wants to do this. But let's talk about them anyway. I address uncomfortable behavioral issues on my team. Just give yourself a score. Like, just take a ballpark, 1 to 5. Just on that, on your team, do you do that 1 to 5? And then I'm going to ask you as a leader, I address uncomfortable behavioral issues that you witness throughout your organization. Like, do you do that also as a leader? Like, if you see it happening through the organization, do you? Now, this third one, the reason I ask this is because some people can do the uncomfortable behavioral issues, but they can't do it like on the spot. And so there's a difference. Some people are comfortable doing it one-on-one, but leaders that are really evolved can do it like in a meeting when it's happening with clarity, charity, and resolve. So like if someone is in the middle of healthy conflict and then someone is like, oh, are you serious? You know, and they're doing some personal attacks or rolling their eyes or like, I can't believe this. You know, a leader's going to step in and say, you know, hey, we want healthy conflict here, and healthy conflict is the pursuit of truth. And, you know, when things start getting like personal, that's different. You know, saying like, I passionately disagree with that. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you start doing the like, you know, that's a whole nother story. Okay. Number 4, I utilize joyful accountability and am not afraid to hold my direct reports and others accountable for agreements they've made. This actually comes from Alan Malady of Ford. He uses that term, meaning he's not afraid to hold direct reports accountable for agreements. And I know joyful sounds a bit crazy, but it's not. It just simply means you've made an agreement, you have a choice, I need to hold you accountable. It's not blame. I'm not doing I'm not doing that. I'm just simply saying it's without a lot of emotion, like you said you were going to do this and you didn't do it. Can you do that? 1 to 5. And then finally, perhaps one of the things that I've become very, very aware of, and I see in organizations and the devastation that it causes, and became very aware of myself and looking back on my history, etc. Number 5, I refrain from participating in any third-party talk or gossip. And I do not allow anyone on my team or in the organization to engage in this type of behavior either. And what do I mean by that? It means that you're talking about someone that is not present. All right. So you either leave a meeting and you're like, can you believe what Jenny said in that meeting? Well, if you're talking about Jenny and she's not there, that's third-party talk. Or even if you're talking about the boss, like, gosh, he's really being harsh recently. Can't believe it. You need to just go to your boss and say, am I like falling down, or do I need to do something differently? You need to be having the conversation with the person that you're having the issue with. Okay. So 1 to 5, where do you fall on that statement? Okay. So I'm actually really curious on this one, which one's the toughest, or which 2 are the toughest for the group? Okay. All right. So a lot of 2 and 3s. 2, so the uncomfortable behavioral issues. And you know what? With that, with the behavioral issues, I think the trickiest thing is, we often always want to like HR, help. And when we really step into our leadership and we build that vulnerability-based trust, we develop a relationship that we're able to sit down and, it's okay to just say, you know what, I have to have kind of a tricky conversation with you. And this may be a little uncomfortable, but I just need you to know this, and I'm hoping we can work through this. But I did notice that during this meeting, I saw this. Can you tell me what was happening for you when this came up? Engage them, find out what was behind it, and because you don't want to just immediately say, this is unacceptable. I mean, you do need to get to that, but you also want to find out what else is going on. Because if you just say that's unacceptable, you're going to shut it down, and whatever is the other issue is going to still be brewing behind the scenes, and it's going to come out sideways in other ways. So you want to talk human to human, all right? Vulnerable to vulnerable. You still need to stand up and just say, you can't roll your eyes in meetings. And I used to be guilty of it, I'll tell you. We're all human, and we're all going to make mistakes. So if you can even sometimes say, I'm human too. You don't have to make it okay for them. I'm not saying soften the blow or, make it super easy. You have to set the line, but you do need to deal with it. All right. So let's move on. Okay. This kind of goes along with the other one. I ensure that my direct reports do not have meetings after the meetings and engage in passive aggressive discussions about their peers. Give yourself a 1 to 5. Number 7 kind of goes a little bit along of what we talked about. If one of my, direct reports is not demonstrating the values of our organization, I will address it directly and immediately. So first you have to know the values of your organization, and you want to address it right away. And 8, this kind of goes back up with the awkward and uncomfortable. I sit through discomfort and awkward moments when difficult conversations take place, so learning and accountability can take place. You just kind of have to give yourself over to it. All right. So this is the one that you're going to divide by 8. And that's responsibility 3, having difficult and uncomfortable conversations. All right. I'm going to keep us moving forward. And, this is tricky stuff. I want you to just know that this does not come easy for anybody. No one wakes up in the morning and looks forward to going to work to have these discussions, but they can be life-changing. You know, as you talk to these individuals, just know that if you can help someone become more self-aware, you just might be talking to someone that's going to be an outstanding leader someday. You might be the one that's really helping them develop self-awareness. They may go on to be an incredible leader. Number 4, very, very important, running great meetings. Something that is one of my favorite aspects, running great meetings. All right, we are clear on priorities and spend most of our time in meetings discussing what is most important to the organization. All right, so are you spending, I would say even 70% of the time in that meeting? The question is, do you spend about 70% of the time in the meeting on the most important organizational priority? 1 to 5. Number 2, every meeting should have a specific purpose, ideally. 1 to 5. Number 3, do your meetings embody optimal decision-making and focus? 1 to 5. 4, team members are highly engaged. You can ask yourself that question, 1 to 5. 5, this goes back to that healthy conflict. You can rate yourself on this because it kind of goes along with the meetings. Number 6, I foster an environment where all voices are heard. 1 to 5, and when people walk into meetings, they feel like they can be 100% themselves without any fear of retribution. Okay, for those of you that are hanging on here, I know it's been a long day, but which ones out of these is the hardest? One still there willing? Ooh, different ones. Oh, so we've got some 3s, 4s, 1 and 2s. I would have guessed that it would have been, I would have thought that maybe we've got it all over the board on this one. That's really interesting.
It's so nice, Deborah, having the reactions in the chat. And I just want to jump in here a little bit, loving this. We have about 3 to 4 minutes left.
Okay, perfect.
Thanks.
Okay, 4 for larger meetings. All right. Well, it is all across the board. So it means that running great meetings is one of the more challenging ones. So here's what I'm going to do. I am going to put right now in the chat box my email. That's my email. And for anyone that is interested in having me email them the rest of the you know, the assessment, I will be happy to do that to them because we won't get through it. I wanted to have enough engagement and I didn't know for sure if we would get through it all. So feel free to just shoot me an email, just say would like the rest of it, and I'll send it to you so that you have each of these. I'd be happy to do that for you. I can show you just very quickly so that you can see just the rest. I can move this chat box out of the way. Whoops, oops, sorry. You'll see that this is the next, if you wanted to see, you know, it's talking about how you follow through on meetings. And then when you get to responsibility number 5, what we end up talking about is communicating constantly and repetitively to employees. And that's how that ends. So really how I want to end is telling you that each of these, and I'm just going to stop sharing and come back, you should feel really good that you were brave enough to kind of go through the assessment. This is not at all easy to kind of look inward and think, this is what it takes to be really, really healthy. Most of you are already, like I said, doing incredible work at your organizations. And this is what I'm talking about, the fine tuning. And so if it's helpful at all to identify like, I'd like to go in further on these areas, then good for you. You have a lot to feel really proud of. And hopefully it's made you think a little bit differently about some of those areas that you might want to, embrace, avoid a little less, and think about. So I'm very appreciative of having this opportunity to spend your breakout session with you. And thank you very much.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much, Deborah. Deborah Mersino, really appreciate your time and appreciate you putting your email in the chat so people can get the rest of this assessment. What a fabulous breakout room, everyone. Thank you for joining.